Ruth, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here again.
Yes, it's good to have you back here again. And what I want to dive into on this show is I want to dive into what is this whole concept about us being spiritual beings. I mean, it seems to me we're pretty flesh and blood. So metapsychiatry keeps talking about how we're spiritual beings. We're not physical beings. So please enlighten us on what that really means.
It's very confusing, actually, isn't it? Because the world is speaking about being spiritual beings. This is not exclusive to metapsychiatry, but I think metapsychiatry sheds some new light on it. Of course, the first thing we need to do is to define what the word spiritual means, which is non-material substance. So what is there about us that is non-material? Because you're talking about the flesh and blood and the bones and the organs and the brain. What is it about us that's non-material? And that's where, would you like to guess?
Well, you bring up some interesting points. The first thing that comes to my mind is, well, love. A sense of our humanity, what we sort of refer to as humanity, which is our compassion, our ability to relate, to be connected to other people. These are things that are non-material.
Yes. So we can say that spiritual values and spiritual qualities and inspiration, wisdom, understanding, these are spiritual aspects of being as well. But actually, it's the part of us that we call consciousness. And consciousness has been left out of the equation, so to speak, up until now. We thought we lived in a phenomenal world consisting of space, time, matter, and energy. And now we're saying, no, we've left something out. It's the consciousness of the individual that has been left out of the picture.
Well, can you define consciousness for us to understand what that is? That's another big word.
Yes, it is.
That I think it's been thrown around a lot, and I don't know if we know what it really is.
Well, let's use a synonym for it, awareness. That we're more familiar with. So that's what consciousness is, the ability to be aware. So we have the ability to be aware of many things, more than we're aware of normally. And the first thing is self-awareness. We can be aware of ourselves and of what we are doing and what we are thinking, and we can be aware of what is going on around us, of other people, but we're not usually aware that there's a higher level of awareness, which is to be aware of those non-material substances we were just speaking about, spiritual values, spiritual qualities, and inspired ideas. So to be a consciousness is to be aware on all those different levels. And how often are we aware of these aspects of our being?
So we can be aware that we're non-material?
Well, you're aware that awareness is something that is not material, is it?
Yes, right, okay.
Yeah, you can't put your finger on it. You can't locate where it is. Today, many individuals are speaking of consciousness as non-local. It doesn't exist in any locality. Where does it come from? It's here. It's available to us. We're aware that we are awarenesses.
So I can be aware that I'm thinking. I can be aware that I'm here on this set and that we have the cameras rolling. I can be aware of how I'm feeling.
Yes.
And so what else are you saying? What is it to be spiritual then?
Are you aware of a state of Pegel we spoke about last time? Are you aware of peace? Are you aware of joy? Are you aware of happiness? Are you aware of beauty? These are values that all of us can be aware of, but how often are we aware of them?
Right, they're qualities, and I guess I have to slip in and out. I have to remember to be aware of peacefulness, to remember to be aware that there can be gratitude or love around.
Yes, yes, that's right. It's interesting to note that there's a wonderful story that is told about the Buddha when he was asked, who is he? Who are you? Are you God? And he said, no, I'm not God. Well, are you an angel? No, I'm not an angel. Then are you a prophet? No, I'm not a prophet. What are you? And he said, I am awake. That's what awareness is, to be awake to all of those different levels, so that we're existing in a world that is phenomenal. But how do we see that world? Can we see it from a spiritual perspective? Do we see life in the context of the spiritual reality? Or are we just stuck in the phenomena, seeing only the material and thinking that's all there is?
Well, it seems to me that we can't have a conversation about being spiritual beings without also addressing this whole concept of God. Because people can't think about spiritual, I think, without thinking about some sort of higher being. We think about a higher being that is higher than all of us, that it's encompassing of all of us, and that we're all down here, so to speak, and God is up there in some sort of heaven.
I think we all grew up with that kind of image.
Yeah.
Because, of course, that's the only way a child can conceive of it. A child doesn't have the ability to think abstractly yet. And this is even beyond abstract. So the word God is a real stumbling block to all of us, I think. It certainly has been in my life until actually metapsychiatry gave me some words, namely omniactive love intelligence, which suddenly made a great deal of sense to me. But before I say that, you know, there are many wonderful words for God. There are many ways to see God. Just yesterday I was speaking to a minister who told me that in Zulu, God is called Unkula, Unkula, and it means big, big. And I thought, well, I've never heard that one before. That's interesting. Big, big. That really explains something. It's beyond ourselves, right? So what is this that is beyond ourselves? It seems to be the higher mind of our mind, the infinite mind, the universal mind, the divine consciousness. So there are lots of different words. There's even the word, the fundamental order of existence. What does that consist of? What is that fundamental order? So we're saying that the fundamental order is the source, whatever is existence itself, and that is the source of spiritual values, spiritual qualities, and inspired, creative, intelligent ideas. So it gives us something really tangible to work with when we're trying to live a God-centered life or interested in living a spiritually conscious life.
Well, you know, it seems to me that so many discussions about spirituality or ways of thinking about it and wanting to live that way have this kind of separation between this sense of what you're talking about, the universal order, God, big, big, however we might talk about that presence. But there's a difference between that and then who I am right here, what happens every day in my life. So what does metapsychiatry say about that?
Well, what happens in everyday life is according to how your consciousness sees reality. Do you see the spirituality of life, or do you just see the materiality of life? And if you are seeing life only from the perspective of a human being, which is, we could define it as a person, a material being, who is autonomous, who is self-motivated, who is self-energized, self-propelled, has to decide to come up with everything themselves and lives all alone, then you're seeing life strictly as a human being. But if you see yourself as a spiritual being, then no longer are you just dealing with a physical, phenomenal world. You're actually looking through a different lens entirely. You're looking through the lens of peace and assurance and gratitude and love and generosity and freedom and goodness. And it changes the way you see the phenomena. It's an amazing thing how it happens.
Yeah, one of the things I love about metapsychiatry is that it talks about mental health and spiritual health as being a beneficial presence in the world. That in a way it's saying, how I take that is that our purpose in life is to be like a gateway to God, to be a presence for this love intelligence that is at the essence of who we all are. And that seems to me to all of a sudden bring all these concepts of God that seem distant right down into the here and now in this present place.
Yes, because you see, the more we can see spiritual values, the more we are actually seeing God, put it in quotes, because God is the source of, or that is what God is spiritual values and spiritual qualities. So to be a beneficial presence, we could say the presence is a quality of consciousness, which is beneficial. And we can juxtapose that with being a beneficent person, let us say. If you're looking from the human level, you can say that the purpose of life is to be a good individual, a good person. So a do-gooder is a beneficent person. In contrast to that is a beneficial presence. That's a quality of consciousness. It's not a doer. It's not a thinker. It's not a beer. I mean, it is a beer. It's being who you really are, which is beneficial in everything that you do and say.
Yes, what I love about that definition of being a beneficial presence is it doesn't have anything to do with coping or doing or growing or learning. It's really about the beingness of being present. And so that when we go into a state of agitation, when we go into a state of anxiety, we're sort of mentally ill in a way. We're not quite who we really are.
That's right. And we don't realize that. We don't realize that to be anxious and to be fearful, to be sad, to be disturbed, this is not our normal state of consciousness. This is not our true state of consciousness. It's what we seem to be as human beings, and we're all so used to it that we don't realize that there's some other level of existence that we could go to that would heal our anxiety and our fears. And of course, that's the work in counseling and in the work in our groups, is to help people to understand that there are very practical ways for us to come to the awareness of the fact that we are a spiritual or divine consciousness.
Well, I want to get back to that, but first of all, I want to spend some more time with this definition of God, which is omniactive, love intelligence, right? Is there more to it than that?
No, omniactive love hyphen intelligence, actually. That is more to it, and that's a very important aspect of it, because what Dr. Hora realized, that spiritual love is always intelligent, and what is intelligent is always loving.
Well, you have to talk about that, because those two things usually seem very different.
Yes, they do, but they go together. And the practical way I can explain it is in my own life, that I used to think, that is to say, I would have made a decision, a choice, and I thought it was loving. I was doing my best. I thought it was loving, but it didn't work out. And I realized later it wasn't intelligent. Or I would make what I thought was an intelligent choice, and it didn't work out. And I would discover later, that wasn't really very loving. And I'm reminded of the biblical saying I attributed to St. Paul, who said, "The good that I would, I do not, and the evil that I would not, that I do." And I thought, I've done that a million times in my life. Not that we would say it's evil, but it's not the good that I did. I thought I was doing it, but it didn't work out.
Well, so what do you mean by intelligent, though? What makes something intelligent?
Yes. Well, are we talking about IQ here? Are we talking about learning certain bits of knowledge and being able to regurgitate them? How much do we know about the world? No. Intelligence is a freely inflowing gift, continually inflowing gift of inspired ideas, which meet our needs moment by moment. It's constantly flowing. But we're so busy being doers in our life, living on the human level, that we're not aware that we have this ability to receive ideas to meet all our needs.
So it's like this creative flow of inspired ideas that comes to us when we allow it.
When we allow it. Or when we cultivate an interest in it and then allow it.
And that combined with love, what's the definition of love? What's love?
Well, this is another one that's difficult, because normally we think of love in human terms. It's usually revolving around attraction. If somebody gives us what we want, then we love them. But if they don't give us what we want, then we don't like them all of a sudden, and we can even hate them. So the person we would rather love, say our family members, our spouses, our parents, our children, we find out all of a sudden we're harboring real anger and resentment against them.
Do we expect love to be having to do with attachment or how you treat other people? It has a lot of definitions.
Yes, and it has to do with also giving things that really manipulate other people to do what they want them to do. So it's giving gifts and spending money, and there are lots of different ways that we can show human love. But this is not divine love. And divine love is defined in metapsychiatry as non-personal, non-conditional benevolence. Non-personal, Doesn't that sound awful?
It does.
Sounds so cold and
Yeah.
so distant.
So sounds so detached.
Yes, but what it really means is that love itself is what is good, and love is loving. To be loving is to be manifesting God's love. So we love being loving. That's one of our expressions in metapsychiatry. Just to love being loving with no strings attached, no conditions.
That love is part of that presence, right? That as we recognize that we're spiritual beings, love is our natural state.
Yes, exactly. But did we know that
No.
until it was pointed out to us by someone somewhere along the line?
Now, when you say it, it sounds so logical in a way. It sounds so, well, of course, that's what it is. And of course, to enjoy being loving, to love being loving, to love just being a positive presence within any particular situation,
Yes.
is always great. I mean, it always
It's beneficial.
helps. It's beneficial. That's the right word. I was looking for that word.
Yeah, it's beneficial. It doesn't hurt anyone. It's always a good thing.
And so God is omniactive. Explain that now. What is omniactive? That's a big word.
Everywhere active. There's no place in the entire universe where God's love and intelligence is not available to us. Anyone, no matter what their circumstances, can tune in, we could say, to omniactive love intelligence and be available to receive the ideas or the love or the whatever is needed in that moment. And it will come forth if we are interested in it. As Dr. Horace said often, it's not difficult to be enlightened. It's just difficult to be interested in enlightenment because we're so busy with the world.
Yeah, we get so hung up in doing and task-oriented and expecting or wanting our life to go in ways that we think it should, and to feel that we have to make it happen in some way.
Exactly. And so we're suggesting a whole other way to live, and that is to become aware of yourself as a spiritual being rather than seeing yourself simply as a human being. And another way in which we can become aware of this is this faculty of awareness that we have, or this consciousness that we are, is that normally what we do when something happens is to react. We react simply by our conditioning. We're used to saying something or doing something as a reaction. And there is a higher level of awareness which is called the ability to respond. So if we have the ability to respond, then we are willing to set aside our tendency to react and say, wait a minute, rather than reacting, let me see if there is some idea that can come to my mind at this moment, and let me wait for that to come. And if it doesn't, then you don't respond. And so very often when I'm counseling with married couples, I will say, stop reacting to each other when you when you see that that's what's happening, and just stop and listen and see if something comes to mind. And in that moment that something comes, it will be loving and it will be intelligent, and this will take care of the problem. You don't have to talk about the problem. The way to find the solution is not talking about the problem. You can't solve the problem on the level of the human being.
Well, you know what that brings up, though, is that the resistance there, I mean, I'm sure you've come up against this, especially when you're dealing with people who are married or trying to work things out, is that you have to give up being right.
Oh, yes.
That you might hear the wisdom that's there. You might be quiet enough and hear it.
Yes.
But you might not want to say it because then you won't be right anymore.
That's right. One of Dr. Horace's little booklets, What Does God Want? Oh, no, sorry, it's called Self-Transcendence. Starts off with, if you are more interested in being and living and seeing the truth than in being right, you have transcended yourself. And that's what is needed, because when we're not transcendent, coming at something from a transcendent viewpoint, we do get into disagreements. We argue, we have differences of opinions, and we can blow up at the drop of a hat. So it's not a good thing not to be aware of this ability that we have of self-transcendence.
So going back to the fact that we're spiritual beings, what you're saying is, you're not saying that we're not flesh and blood. We are flesh and blood. But What is it? So we can be aware of spiritual qualities. We can be aware of the spiritual presence of omniactive love intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And so then how does that interrelate with what this physical part of doing this life is?
Well, we're interested in the quality of our consciousness. We're not interested in our bodies. So the more you become interested in seeing spiritual values and seeing what is good, the more you are living in your consciousness, not in the body. And the body actually has a way of getting healthier, and life has a way of looking better all the time as a result of your ability to live in consciousness.
Well, how do you explain that?
How do
what
I?
Is, yeah, what does that mean, that happens?
Well, that's a
that
miracle.
if we don't pay attention to our body and make
Mm-hmm.
sure that we eat healthy food all the time and that we exercise and work really hard to be beautiful, how do we get healthier if we don't do that?
Well, the amazing thing is that the more you live in spiritual values, the healthier you become, even without taking care of anything that is physical. On the other hand, there are ways, if you have a physical problem, then we seek to understand the meaning of that, and that perhaps we could talk about in another program, because it's a little too difficult to go into it in detail right now. But the idea is that we're not ignoring that we need to pay attention to what is healthy living, that we would pay attention to eating in a healthy way or exercising. Of course not. But we're saying, is this coming from the desire to pump out all the exercise, do all the exercise we can, or concern ourselves with being so focused on nutrition that we lose awareness of everything else? No. It means that if we are living in a pagal consciousness, the ideas come to us. We'll be led to the right book to learn about nutrition. We'll be led to the right exercise for us at that particular time. Otherwise, we might be doing things that are harmful for us at that time.
It's really a shift in where we start our life, where we live our life from. It's living from this perspective that we are part of this loving consciousness versus I'm here as an individual and I have to do everything myself to make my life work.
Yes, that's the same. That's what we always get back to.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself as a human being who is all alone in this world, having to figure out everything by yourself, being self-energized, self-propelled, self-motivated, all those things? Or do you see yourself in a greater context as part of reality, as part of the divine? And if you see yourself, as you learn to see yourself that way, by becoming aware of spiritual values and cultivating an interest in them, and your consciousness becomes imbued with them, then your life is totally different. It's not that the material changes. You know, what's out there is going to be there still. But the way you see it, you suddenly see beauty where you hadn't seen it before. You suddenly see in an individual intelligence. You see goodness. You see harmony. You see all sorts of things that had been obscured from your view beforehand.
It's almost like taking a walk in the woods, and I can be taking a walk in the woods, and I can be thinking about what happened yesterday, or I can be thinking about a problem that I have, and I won't even notice that I'm surrounded by beautiful trees, yes. Right? And then all of a sudden I can wake up, and I go, oh, this is a beautiful day.
Yes.
Listen to those birds. I hadn't even noticed them before.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it wasn't that they weren't there. Right? I just hadn't been paying attention. I'd been focused on how am I going to solve this problem
yes.
that I have.
Yes. You were in your mind, totally wrapped up in your own thoughts, and therefore the rest was unavailable to you. You didn't even see it. So that's what you're a Buddha, you see. That's what it means to be a Buddha, to
it's waking up to that environment.
To seeing everything. To seeing everything. Aware of yourself, aware of what you are feeling, aware of your thoughts, aware of what is going on around you, and aware of the beauty. That's the whole point.
But it sounds like also being aware that I'm a spiritual being, that being aware that I am connected to all that is, in a way, that I'm connected to omniactive love intelligence, that there is a continuous flow of creativity and inspired ideas that I am a part of. Yes. So if I let go to that or remember that, then that problem that I'm having will be solved.
That's right.
Right? That the answer will be there if I remember what's really true, that I can live in that larger awareness.
That's the idea. And that's what makes you spiritual, by the way, is the fact that you are able to be aware of it. You're able to be aware of spiritual qualities, spiritual values, inspired ideas. That's what makes you a spiritual being.
And then use them, and then we apply that to our actual physical day-to-day. It's not to ignore that.
Well, you know, it's not something we can do, Nancy. It's something that we are. If we are aware of them, we are that. That's the thing that's so amazing. That to be aware of beauty means to be beautiful. You're seeing beauty, so you become beautiful. If you're seeing goodness, you become good. If you're seeing love, you become loving.
And if I'm aware that there are creative ideas out there, then the solution will be there, right?
That's right. That's right. It's always available to be known.
Well, we only have a moment left in this show today, but I can't help but ask this question. That in metapsychiatry, it seems like this is very simple. Whereas so many religious or philosophical ideas make it very complicated. But there's something very simple about this. What do you want to say about that in just the few moments we have left?
Well, I think I'd have to quote again what Dr. Horace said, which is, it's easy to be enlightened. It's just not easy to be interested in it. Believe it or not, we are not usually interested. We have to suffer or be drawn. Another saying of Dr. Horace, we're either driven through suffering or drawn through wisdom. So let's hope that we can be drawn through wisdom.
Yes. Well, thank you, Ruth, on that note, and thank you for doing the work you're doing and for being part of this discussion with me.
Thank you for inviting me again. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you for listening. This is Nancy Rosanoff with The Listening Place saying, be sure to tune in next time as we continue our series on metapsychiatry. Bye for now.